Councillors and members of the public to the latest meeting of Northamptonshire's Executive, and I include those who are watching the meeting on the live stream via YouTube. Members and members of the public, you are reminded to keep your microphones muted unless invited to speak, and if you could ensure your phones and laptops are on silent so the meeting can go ahead without any disruption. So moving on. Item 1, apologies for absences.
Thank you, Chair. There are no apologies, although Councillor Rowley might be a little bit late in arriving.
Thank you very much, David. So, item 2, minutes of the agenda held on the 21st of December 2023. Those minutes are in your agenda packs and they're set out on pages 5 to 30. Are there any comments regarding their accuracy? No, can I have a mover to move the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Howe. And a seconder, Councillor Binley, thank you very much. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please?
Unanimous, Chair.
So, members' declarations of interest. Item 3 on the agenda. Are there any declarations of interest from members? Okay, no declarations of interest. Thank you very much for that. Item 4, notifications to request the meeting. There are various notifications to request this meeting, and they are noted, and we'll be calling you up as and when that particular piece of business comes up that you want to speak about. So, item 5, Corporate Scrutiny Committee Budget Consultation Submission 24-25. And I'd like to invite Councillor Lorman to address the meeting. Councillor Lorman, you have a maximum of 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody, and thank you for letting me speak this morning on the budget. As you know, following the 11 sessions of budget scrutiny of all areas of our council, our recommendations are contained in your budget report, so I'm not going to elaborate much on that. I've only got 2 things to say. I would like to highlight a specific concern of our budget scrutiny panel, which related to the Children's Trust spending projections and the impact that will have not only on this year's budget, but on the future budgets as well. The Corporate Scrutiny Committee will need further support through the leader of NNC and WNC to help the Children's Trust work within the contractual figures. I know, and we are all aware, that you have a new board that was formed very ably and supported very nicely with, I need to call him Councillor Watts, David Watt. We are aware of the pressures of that all services face, but we hope that earlier intervention, support and scrutiny and working together in collaboration will hopefully result in an improved spending policy that will not impact much on the needed, or not at all, on the needed support for our vulnerable children, because they must never ever suffer. It is our duty to look after them. The second point is, we looked at our investment in ICT, and you will see that in your paper, and our ICT arrangements in general were heavily discussed in our panel meeting. We have highlighted as being much of concern. The Corporate Scrutiny Committee intends to continue to scrutinize S-Power Management Board plan to seek value for money for all our services, and specifically the speedy harmonization of the various legacy programs of ICT and attempt to reduce vulnerabilities. And as such, my own suggestion is to re-establish a new panel from the Corporate Scrutiny Committee and also draw IT experts from within our own colleagues, and we have quite a few who are experts in that field, and to work with the enabling service ICT and assess and fully understand the current arrangements between NNC and WNC that are worth, I think, round about 6+ million. So it is quite a number for their operability and service improvements and offer recommendations. And ending, I would like to end with my thanks as Vice Chairman Corporate Scrutiny Committee for our officers, for their extensive support and work to enable our programme to conclude in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Norman, and thank you very much for the time and effort of your scrutiny committee that's brought this proposals through, and it's certainly welcomed, and we look very much to working with you and looking at some of your recommendations. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Dorothy Maxwell to join the meeting. Councillor Maxwell, you have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning. On page 51, the Council will look in ways in funding wellbeing advisor posts, but there is no one in posts. This creates a savings. Question: why do we not have a wellbeing advisor in posts? This would help children in schools. Then on page 55, it states that there are longer waiting times for children with mental health issues services to access this service. Why? You state this is a national problem, but NNC should be looking at this, not nationally. If you had a wellbeing advisor in each school, this would clearly help children with their mental health, with what would be paid for by NNC and the government. Last week, we saw Esther, that's the mother of Brianna, on TV explaining how she would like to see a mindful teacher in every school, which would help children with their mental health issues. Why can we not employ this person, or at least pay for one teacher? This is the mother of the child who was killed by two 15-year-old children because of their trans issue. The two 16-year-old children are now spending the next 20 years in prison. Dedicated school grants on page 61. In it says that 100 children are waiting for places in SEND schools. It did not explain these children. Where are they in school? It's now February. Why not? The Officer for Early Years was not present at this meeting, and that she could have provided briefing notes, presentation on early years, and also answer any questions. Why not? It is an important part of their lives, and yet no one was present. If you have this budget scrutiny panel, surely it was a major point at looking at children as young as they are. What message does this send out that an officer was not in attendance or supplied notes? Lastly, mental health is a major issue in schools. We have to help schools meet the needs along with the NHS and play their part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Maxwell. I'd like to invite Councillor Jim Hakewell to address the meeting. Councillor Hakewell, you have a maximum of 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come along, as I often do. I'd like to thank the Chairman of the Budget Scrutiny for her courtesy in the meetings and success in occasionally curbing my enthusiasm for asking penetrating questions about the budget in scrutiny meetings. It was a shame that, having twice publicised that any member could attend the scrutiny sessions, but to my recollection only 3 councillors took up the opportunity to observe the debate. I was also disheartened that when Green Alliance leader, Councillor Henry Fedorovich, attended one of the meetings, she was not allowed to make any comments. I could understand sticking to a process in a decision-making meeting with multiple speakers wishing to contribute, but it seemed wholly unreasonable to stop Emily from speaking, or anyone else from that matter, when she had allocated her personal time to attend. The entire process was carried out with no opportunity for members of the community to either observe or, even better, to speak to the Scrutiny Committee about their views and aspirations. I equally note that the executive did not make themselves available to hold an in-person budget presentation to which members of the community could have attended and questioned executive members. The national picture is grim for local government, but assigning responsibility for deficits in our budget to COVID, the invasion of Ukraine, cost inflation, particularly utilities, does not mean we shouldn't be looking for every way possible to show ourselves to be resilient rather than hunching our shoulders and saying we can't solve the problems locally. At the Audit Committee late last year, it was predicted that the Corby and County Council 21 accounts would be signed off before Christmas. Has this now been achieved? Actually, they didn't say which Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hagar. Councillor Lynn Buckingham, invite you to address the meeting.
Good morning and thank you. Before you at agenda item 5, you have the report from the corporate scrutiny panel that looked at everything, and you have a number of recommendations there. I'm not going to go through those at this moment, but obviously would like to thank the portfolio holders, the officers, and everybody else that contributed and came and presented and gave us advice, support throughout the budget scrutiny sessions. We noted as a committee that outside influences have had a huge impact on us since the beginning. So we are a young local authority, a unitary. There are so many things that have had to come together to bring that unitary together, as well as a lot of external forces which impact on our budgets, and we acknowledge the hard work that everybody's put in to actually bring the budgets forward, and all the work behind that goes on. We also note, though, that there are still those risks going forward which could have an impact, if not this year, certainly next year and the year after. And part of our job was looking at the medium-term financial planning and how the budget sits within that, rather than going line by line through the budget itself. And there is that fine balance between having the funds to deliver the critical services for our residents and balancing that budget. So all those things are acknowledged throughout this report. I will answer to Councillor Maxwell's report that we didn't get the early years block, as David Watts will probably say. We held it on the last day, and we had 2 officers there to take us through that. So it was because we'd run over on the children's services themselves that we moved the early years block to the last day. So they were there. It was discussed. It's not in the report. Okay. Thank you. And it's good it's in draft form. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to go through the recommendations one by one, or whether you've actually read them and I don't need to. But happy to, I don't know, can you ask me questions?
So what we will do now is we will debate the report, and we note your recommendations, and for this to be referred obviously to full council eventually. And look, we thank you very much for your recommendations. It is really helpful for us as an executive to have that independent arm of our council to overview everything that's going forward on budget and various other things that have gone on throughout the year. And it's useful for us to lean into the experience that your panel has and has identified in the report. And I thank you and Councillor Lorman and the rest of your councillors that have been on that panel. And also, Chair, I thank you for your ability to keep the meetings in order. And that's one very, very difficult thing to do as a chair, but you have exercised that exceptionally well this year. And your recommendations are good. What I'm going to do is open it up to the executive now for a debate, and we can then look to refer this on to full council, I believe, is where we take this next to adopt those recommendations.
And just before you do that, I will say that as a team, because I think that scrutiny benefits from teamwork, we've learned a lot too, and some of that learning will be taken to the Scrutiny Management Board for how we go forward as a scrutiny panel. So thank you very much for your thanks, and I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. That's an excellent idea to take it to Scrutiny Management Board, fine-tune whatever you need to. Members of the executive, have you got any comments in relation to the report that's before you at the moment? Councillor Brackenbury.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. From a portfolio perspective, I'd like to pass my thanks to for the courtesy and the erudition of the scrutiny of those scrutiny budget sessions. I found them a useful sort of second check on what we're up to, and the areas that you highlighted were all very valid and very well worth exploring further. Perhaps on a morning like this, it's of particular interest to note the careful attention that was being paid about flooding and flood risk. I think we could all agree with that. But you're absolutely right to raise it. It is, as you rightly point out in the report, a varied and multi-agency approach that needs to be taken. And I just think it encapsulates the careful work that the Scrutiny Commission or the Scrutiny meeting has been doing to highlight these areas of concern. And so, I very much welcome that, and I very much welcome the scrutiny of my portfolio area. So thank you very much for all concerned.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brackenbury. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the speakers that spoke. I'll address the Children's Trust first. I think it was Councillor Lorman. Absolutely right. It's not that we've been unwilling to work with WNC and the Children's Trust. We have been working with them since the start of the council. The new board has been set up and is working extremely well. And so absolutely we need to get on top of it, and absolutely we will do everything we can to help them remain in budget. Councillor Buckingham, thank you for about Councillor Maxwell, thank you. Councillor Maxwell's point, it was rearranged to 2 days later on the Friday for the early years. It is a vital part of what we do in education, so absolutely it should be in it. You will also know during that 3 weeks that this was taking place, we had a Ofsted in with a SEND inspection, which took officers' time completely for most of, well, I'd say 5 days, but actually a lot of them did 7 days a week working on it. So that's why, but it absolutely was covered within that. But thank you for raising it.
Thank you. Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify the situation on the audited accounts not being signed off, that is not down to this council, that is down to Ernst Young, who are our previous or predecessor auditors, and the time they're taking to sign it off, both for the last Corby accounts and also with West Northants, who are managing the Northamptonshire County Council sign-off as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bundy. I'm just looking at... Sorry, Councillor Edwards, did you want to come back in?
I'm really sorry. I didn't cover the topic of the mental health advisors, Councillor Buckingham, so really sorry. So as you'll know, that academy schools decide within their own budget what they spend their money on. And I know some of them are certainly looking into that, but within our own schools, we are consulting the government with what we can do with this, because you are absolutely right. There is a national shortage of advisors. There is a national waiting list of up to 2 years for some children to see mental health, and we know that mental health is on the rise. So we are absolutely looking into it to see what we can do about it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Buckingham, you've heard some response back from the executive on this. Is there any other further comments that you wish to make before we look to refer this on to full council for their noting?
No, not at this moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Buckingham. So basically, we've heard what's been said in scrutiny, and what we will do is refer this on to full council for that report to be noted. And again, thank you very much for yourself, your colleagues within your committee, for everything you've done. So we now move on to item 6, the general fund budget for 24-25 and the MTFP. I'd like to invite Councillor Hakewell to address the meeting. Councillor Hakewell, you have a maximum of 3 minutes.
Thank you again, Chairman. Just to clarify from the previous question, have the accounts been signed off? That was my question.
Councillor Hakewell, we've moved on to another
In today's agenda, paragraph 7.57, bullet point 3, it reads, there is an income pressure of 442,000 associated with a one-off rental pressure for the commercial property portfolio, which is to be funded by reserves. I regularly predicted the risk of buy-to-let offices and warehouses when Kettering Borough Council borrowed £50 million to create a portfolio of assets to generate income to keep council tax at zero, as central government reduced support for local government. The option was to increase council tax, as was permitted. The government eventually clamped down on borrowing to generate revenue, rightly so, as some of the current high-profile council failures across the country are due to high-risk acquisitions failing to meet their target or indeed failing altogether. What are the current risks to this council of this past commercialisation strategy? What assurances can the executive give that this year's near £500,000 loss won't multiply in future years? In bullet point 4, same item, there is also a pressure of 65,000 relating to the enhanced provision of the Travellers Unit. What is this pressure and what connection does it have in relation to the delivery of the temporary travellers stopping site at Rothwell? In paragraph 2.11, I'd like to highlight 2 key areas from our corporate priorities in relation to revenue expenditure within this aspect of the budget to fund the temporary travellers stopping site currently being proposed at Rothwell Green Space. And I quote, the budget will underpin the priorities contained within the Council's corporate plan, which was approved by Council at its meeting 1st December 2021, and has the following 6 key thematic policy areas. Bullet point 1, helping people to lead active, fulfilled lives, helping people to be more active, independent and fulfilled. Bullet 4, creating a green, sustainable environment, taking a lead on improving the green environment, making the area more sustainable for generations to come. We will be reminded of these honourable objectives when considering the capital plan later in this meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Hakewell. Councillor Anne Lee, if you'd like to address the meeting, you have a maximum of 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The Labour Group has developed alternative ideas that will be put forward, but we have been waiting for those ideas to be costed for since the first half of January. We do intend to submit those in time before full council about the budget. Today I'd like to raise 2 points about the budget. The first one about the green waste charges. On page 121 of today's agenda, we can read under point 7.61 that since launching the subscription for the garden waste service in April 2023, the council has subsidised the service as the actual cost of operation is more than the income from the subscription payments. And this year the costs are even expected to rise. So with hindsight, was it a good idea to introduce this garden waste service on subscription? I called in that decision, but the call-in was narrowly defeated. So do you still think it was the right decision to make at a time that understaffing leads to some problems in this council when new things are undertaken? On another subject, this week the executive and many organisations in North Northants spent a very successful, productive day at the Kettering Park Hotel to discuss a vision for the future, and I applaud mid to long-term thinking. Now, I think that I call into question the wisdom of expecting voluntary organisations not to have that long-term planning, and for the housing advice to residents contract to be allowed to expire. It will expire. There's a contract for £80,000 a year that's been running for 5 years with the Citizens Advice Bureau. It will expire at the end of March, and people have been of the Citizens Advice Bureau have had to be put on notice. They may lose their job because there's just no tender being put out. There's no news on whether that contract will be extended. So I know that probably this is on your agenda, but we should not really leave it this late, a month and a half, and nothing is happening at the moment as far as the Citizens Advice Bureau or Accommodation Concern is concerned as to extending that contract. We should allow them to plan in advance, and housing advice is very important to our residents at this moment, at a time when many people are facing increase in rental charges, and they need that advice. So I would draw your urgent attention to that, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lee. I'd like to invite Councillor Bunday now to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Before I start, can I declare an interest with Councillor Lee's raising of Citizens Advice Bureau, because Citizens Advice Bureau are a customer of mine. So I'll leave that for other portfolio holders to answer Councillor Lee's inquiries on that. Councillor Lee also brought up green waste. And yes, green waste has gone up to £46.70 per year. Total cost recovery is probably a very, very good, prudent approach to any of our services. We have to collect green waste. When we looked at it a year ago, the cost was going to be £56. Because of the take-up, it is now £50. So the two are narrowing and converging, and I think that that's good, prudent financial management on our part. Going on to Councillor Hakewell's comments, the the cost, the pressure of just over £400,000 is down to one of our tenants entering into an agreement which is a proper commercial agreement, which is quite logical, which is that if they continue after a break point, that they have a period of rent-free occupation. And we at Kettering Borough Council, we actually allocated in the budget, the medium-term budget, the cost of that, because we built it in, and that's the reason it's there. So it's nothing unusual at all. And what I would say is that I think our commercial investments have been very, very good. The enhanced traveller provision, that is down to the fact that we want to have our traveller unit working weekends, bank holidays, and late on Friday nights, because as you know as well as everybody else, the time that travellers turn up on sites is normally at these times, and up until now it's been a situation that we've had to then wait until after the bank holiday or on the Monday after a long weekend or whatever, and so that is what that's for. The Rothwell stopping site has got nothing to do with that, and what I would say is that this meeting today in its whole has got nothing to do with discussing the merits of any particular issue like that. So I would urge you not to do that. As far as the green environment goes, and green spaces, I would suggest you to look at most of our SUEs, where we are actually providing within our planning a lot of green spaces to look after the environment. So moving on to the report, Chair. On the 21st of December, I presented the draft budget to this executive. After approval, along with the housing revenue account and the capital programme, it formed part of the consultation to the residents, local partners and stakeholders of North Northamptonshire. The consultation commenced after that meeting and concluded on the 26th of January. Appendix C of this report is a summary of feedback from the consultation. Appendix E sets out how the consultation was promoted and how consultees could have their say. It also sets out a number and type of responses received. Respondents felt that services were stretched. However, there was a feeling that residents need to see results. There was an expression of frustration at the current service levels, with concern as to whether improvements could be delivered. There is a perception that efficiencies need to be improved and bureaucracy reduced. There were ideas of what they perceived is needed, including the requirement for a vision for enhanced social care, road improvements and maintenance, supporting the arts and libraries, and monitoring of contract work. This is just a small flavour of the comments received, and I would urge everyone to read the appendices. The draft budget formed the subject of no fewer than 7 sessions of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee, starting with the Children's Trust in December and ending on the 23rd of January. Their feedback was reported in the previous item and is also at Appendix G of this report. On the 21st of December, I also presented an addendum to the main budget report setting out the provisional local government finance settlement, which was published a few days earlier. The content of that addendum is now incorporated within the budget. This report builds on the draft budget and reiterates the key points to ensure that this is a complete document when setting out the revenue budget for 24-25 and the medium-term financial plan for North Northamptonshire Council, including the proposal council tax level for 24-25. The revenue budget and medium-term financial plan are part of a suite of reports that will be considered by Council at its meeting on the 22nd of February. Also included will be the housing revenue account budget for 24-25, the capital strategy, capital programme 24-25 to 27-28, and the treasury management strategy. As members know, monitoring reports are brought to this executive monthly and are being continuously monitored by officers. Since being presented in December, there has been a requirement to increase the net budget for adult services. Although actions have been taken to mitigate a growth of £9.2 million, it has still resulted in a net pressure of over £4 million. During January, 46 MPs wrote to the Prime Minister urging that help be given to local government to mitigate pressures being experienced due to social services. As a result, a further £600 million has been made available. How this funding and additional fees and charges has affected the overall budget has been reflected in the table at paragraph 2.5. It demonstrates the level of call upon the Council's reserves, which will smooth the impact of the increased growth, while work is undertaken on further revised service models to be delivered from 25-26 and into future years. At the Executive in December, I said that the government's financial policy that was issued earlier in that month and was the precursor of the settlement being announced had made it clear that the settlement would be one of funding by growth and not new or increased grant funding. The lobbying of some MPs to gain some grant funding is most welcome. The local government provisional finance settlement published on the 18th of December was one-year settlement only. As I have said previously, the failure of government to provide a forecasted settlement over several years has added to the financial pressures, risks and uncertainties over the short and medium term that this and many other councils face. With the additional funding, it assumes an increase of 7.5% in the core spending power for local authorities to meet demand and cost pressures. Whilst this is helpful, the high levels of inflation and demand growth have resulted in significant pressures across council services, which has outstripped this increase and requires further savings to be found. It is predicated on an expectation that the council tax increase will be the maximum allowed. This budget assumes that the council will increase council tax by 4.99%, 2.99% for the core council tax and 2% for the adult social care precept. Of the respondents who answered the question in the consultation as to whether council tax should be raised by the maximum allowed, 44.3% were in agreement and 47.5% were not. The proposed council tax for a Band D property will be £1,740.22, an increase of £82.71 per year or £1.59 per week. A Band A increase will be £1.06 and Band B £1.24 per week. The final local government finance settlement was laid before Parliament on Monday the 5th of February after this report was published. The Council has received further funding of around £36,000 above the sums included within this report. It is proposed that the additional funding is used to reduce the call on reserves, and this will be reflected in the budget report and recommendations to full council on the 22nd. Members are asked to consider this final budget proposal in conjunction with the observations of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee and the wider consultation with our residents and stakeholders, and to agree the recommendations of paragraph 3 of this report. Paragraph 3.1 includes the recommendations to full council to be considered at the budget meeting on the 22nd of February. May I take this opportunity to thank everyone who has contributed in any way to this process. Setting a balanced budget in an authority of such magnitude is not a simple process and takes many people many weeks to achieve. This council provides a wide range of services to the residents of North Northamptonshire, including care to the vulnerable, adults and children, education, the disposal and collection of waste, household waste recycling, economic development, housing and support for the homeless. The budget will underpin the priorities contained within the council's corporate plan, helping people to lead active, fulfilled lives, building better, brighter futures, developing safe and thriving places, creating a green, sustainable environment, building connected communities, and developing modern public services. It is set against a backdrop of events and circumstances beyond the realm and control of this council. The Bank of England base rates remain at a 15-year high of 5.25%. Wars continue in various parts of the world, impacting on our utility and food prices. Although it is almost 4 years since the outbreak of the pandemic, many are still living with the effects of it. Inflation is falling, but the cost of living crisis that these pressures contribute to are still very real for many of our residents. May I remind members that although the draft budget being presented today is balanced, the Council's medium-term financial position remains very challenging, and it must continue to deliver further transformation opportunities to help create a strong and modern council delivering quality, cost-effective services for the benefit of its residents. This budget outlines an estimated net revenue of £763.99 million, including a designated schools grant of £388.5 million. This is set out in the table at paragraph 5.1. As I have just said, although this shows a balanced budget for 24-25, members should recognise a funding gap of nearly £41.5 million 25-26, rising to over £87.5 million by the end of the 2028 financial year. Approximately half of the growth of the core spending power in the government settlement will come from local taxpayers through council tax increases. Full Council accepted the recommendation to maintain local tax support scheme at 25%. The second largest income source for this council is business rates, which amounts to just over £110 million. Northamptonshire has benefited under the present business rates retention system due to an above-average increase in business growth across its area. The way the business rates retention scheme operates in future years could have major financial implications for this council. This council could be affected by the resetting of the point from which growth is measured, funding levels, growth of businesses, the number of businesses ceasing to trade, or a reduction in collection rate. The dedicated schools grant is a ring-fence grant allocated to local government by the government to support a range of education-related services. The Department of Education currently operate a 4-block funding model as set out at paragraph 5.42. It is forecasted that the high needs block will overspend by the end of 23-24. Discussions are ongoing with the Schools Forum and the Department of Education as to how this can be best mitigated. Directorate budgets are summarised at section 7 of this report, and I won't repeat all of what I presented in December, as it's in the report for members to read. As always, demand-led services are the ones that are the most volatile and indeed carry the highest risk. During this financial year, we are already seeing significant overspends in both children's and, as stated earlier, adult social care services. We recognise that the safeguarding and care of those most vulnerable in our society is important in all that we do. However, we must always work hard to stay within the resources that are available to us, and so that all services are protected for our communities. We realise that tackling overspends and implementing change can take time, and the position may get worse before it gets better. But it is necessary that services review how they operate and look for greater efficiencies going forward. This way, we can ensure long-term financial sustainability, and in doing so, the ability to continue to deliver the services that our residents value. Northamptonshire Children's Trust has been delivering children's social care and targeted early help on behalf of Northamptonshire councils, formerly on behalf of Northamptonshire County Council, and since the 1st of April 2021, North and West Northamptonshire. The Trust is funded predominantly from the 2 unitary authorities by means of an agreed contract sum. The initial contract sum was submitted in September 2023, which was in accordance with the contract. The Intelligent Client function led a working party which held regular meetings to undertake a detailed review of the contract submission. This resulted in the final contract sum being presented to the strategic group at its meeting on the 28th of November and agreed by the Children's Trust Joint Committee in January. As part of delivering the contract sum for 24-25, a Transformation and Efficiency Board has been created between the 2 unitary authorities and the Trust. The board aims to create a systemic improvement of services for children in Northamptonshire, whilst driving value for money to ensure that resources are used effectively to support and improve outcomes. The contract sum for the Children's Trust was agreed at £177.4 million, of which Northampton County Council's share is £78.6 million. In negotiating the contract sum for the Children's Trust, it was felt that stronger governance arrangements should be put in place to consider and approve transformation business cases. This is defined as Block B within the budget proposals and referenced in the table at paragraph 7.14 of the 24-25 budget. This equates to around £5.9 million county-wide. Of this, £2.6 million is for transformation activity already agreed, and the remaining £3.3 million, of which 1.3 is funded from Northamptonshire, is available for investment against approved schemes. Paragraph 7.19 sets out the principles of the board, and 7.20 sets out the proposed scheme of delegation, which is recommended at paragraph 3.1.h. The overall contract sum has increased from 23-24 by £32.362 million. Northamptonshire's share is an increase of £14.29 million. The Children's Directorate draft budget, including the Children's Trust, reflects a net pressure of £15.231 million, of which £14.37 million relates to the Children's Trust and £858,000 to the children's services delivered within Northampton Council. As I referred to earlier, the Adult Social Care draft budget reflects a net pressure of £19.826 million, which has increased by £4.096 million from December's draft budget. The main pressures include contractual inflation and other increases for independent care placements. The projected inflation requirement of £3.988 million includes the provision for the National Living Wage in line with announcements by government, and other overheads as well for general fee movements in line with market factors. Northamptonshire have seen a significant increase in the number of clients requiring care. It is recognised that risk remains in the budget assumptions for adult social care due to influences of the demands within the system. A reserve is set aside to help underwrite such risk and to smooth any impact over the long term, whilst alternative mitigations are sought. Further narrative on the budget by Directorate that I presented to the Executive in December can be found within Section 7 and Appendices A and B. The Council's Treasury Management debt portfolio and other associated Treasury Management costs are £12.5 million. There continues to be a risk around the overall cash and loan position for Northamptonshire, not only from the volatile marketplace, but also due to the outstanding legacy audit for 2021 and the disaggregation of the opening position from Northamptonshire County Council. In his written statement to Parliament, when announcing the settlement, the Secretary of State highlighted that government continues to encourage local authorities to consider where possible the use of their reserves to maintain services in the face of service pressures. I would remind members that CIPFA state as part of their financial management code that a core element of a financially sustainable and resilient council is to maintain a prudent level of reserves. Indeed, it is the responsibility of the 151 officer to ensure that this requirement is met. The table at paragraph 9.3 sets out the council's reserves. Most reserves are earmarked for specific purposes or ring-fenced. The council holds just over £24 million of general reserves, which provides a working balance to help cushion the impact of unexpected events or emergencies. As I remind members constantly, once reserves are spent, they are gone. And so a strategy for replenishing any reserve that is to be used must be in place. The reserve strategy includes a range for the level of general fund balance to be at a minimum of 5% and a maximum of 10% of the net revenue budget. The level of reserves included in this budget is £24.2 million, which is around 6.4% of the proposed net revenue budget of £375.3 million. And with that, Chair, I am happy to propose the recommendations of paragraph 3.1 and 3.2.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. Now, I see some members of the Executive already indicated to speak, so without further ado, Councillor Brackenbury.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bunday, for your characteristically comprehensive and detailed analysis of the situation that we find ourselves in. And I'd like to also thank everybody who's in the finance team and has had to do with the preparation of this budget. The amount of work is absolutely incredible, and I think it reflects enormous credit on Janice Gotts and everybody in the finance team. So with that, yes, it's the same story as is reflected up and down the land, that the demand-led services are affecting everything that we do. It is a national issue that local government cannot easily fund the statutory demands that are placed upon us. And I know this is an issue which has been taken up by many local authorities with central government. And some strategic decisions will, of course, have to be made in the fullness of time. Essentially, neither the government nor the local authority have money. We only have what we collect from our ratepayers or from taxpayers in the end, and therefore major decisions will have to be made. It's interesting, Chair, to look at the situation we're in and consider growth. I'm glad you pointed that out, because we are trying to make Northamptonshire an attractive place to come and live in and to set up your business in and to come through and visit and spend all your lovely money. And if we can do that, if we can generate growth, if we can generate business growth, then I think it will assist in some of the financial predicaments we're in. I notice that we collect about £110 million in business rates. Now, that is a lot of contributions from a lot of businesses that operate out of Northamptonshire, and making the vision that we're trying to articulate in things like the Big 50 will make Northamptonshire a more attractive part of England to come and set up your business, and I think will drive some concomitant growth, which will assist so much in the financial situation that we find ourselves in. So I know that the portfolio holders in the demand-led services will have much more to say on their areas, and I know that it's been extensively looked at, discussed, scrutinised, and it is a situation we are where we are. I also make the point that all the directorates have had their spending reined in as tightly as possible, and of course, Chair, you will note that the panel which is set up to analyse any spending over £500, which is a welcome check on what the council is spending its taxpayers' funds on. So again, that's good. In my own area, I do welcome the increase in statutory planning fees, which has put an additional £801,000 into the budget, which isn't, I'm afraid, going to solve everybody's problems, but it is welcome. And with growth coming in, one hopes both in business. We all know about that there is growth predicted in housing as well. Again, it will be helpful to work with the industries in those areas to make sure that we are working together and that we can provide a nice, good environment for people to come and live here, and to come and work here, and to come and play here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brackenbury. Councillor Binley.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to pick up on a few points that have been raised that concern my portfolio area. So first of all, of course, one of the items that was raised about was about the smoothing reserve being used in relation to one of our properties. This had already been accounted for within the smoothing reserve is the fact that it entails a break clause with a commercial property. If the tenant who signed the agreement under the previous Corby Borough Council chooses to stay at the property, then a 9-month rent-free period applies. As you will gather, this means that the tenant has implied that they wish to stay there, and therefore the contract, the lease, will continue for a further 5 years. So we'd already budgeted for this. We'd already taken the income which covers this as part of that lease. And I'd also hasten to add that with a commercial property, it's not that uncommon. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It is a very common practice that happens. So I think that answers that one. Just to pick up on Councillor Lee's point with regards to the collection of garden waste. First of all, I'm just going to pick up on something that Councillor Bunday said. It's not actually a service that we have to provide at this point in time. And in fact, new legislation is coming through, and DEFRA have carried out a consultation, and the outcome of it is the fact that one of the things that they required is that local authorities collect garden waste where requested, and also it does not have to be a free of charge service. And as we know, without rehashing this, previously not previously, but when we originally looked at this, the vast majority of local authorities up and down the country do actually already charge for garden waste collections. It's not a new service that we are providing. It is a change in the service that we provided, in the fact that it became a charge service, albeit, as has already been highlighted, it's something we are still subsidising. And it is a service that is going quite well, as Councillor Bunday said. Actually, we have seen a far greater uptake in our collection service than was originally forecasted, probably because of the rate that we are charging, and the fact that we are still not going to full cost recovery. Just to correct a point that was made earlier, it's £45.60 that is going to be charged annually for it, and yeah. So as I've said, it's a service that we do subsidise, and at the moment are continuing to subsidise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Binley. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, in adults, as has been said, a demand-led service, and I'm very pleased that the government has recognised that and the pressures, and has, on the 24th of, 24th of January, I think, announced extra money. So for that, as is outlined in 2.5, that will bring in an extra 2.629 million, and that then means that we have to take less out of the reserves. So that's very welcome, as has been said. Once the reserves are gone, they're gone, and so I very much welcome that. The pressure in that service is such that it's unprecedented. In the last year, there's been 25% increase in the over 65s and 15% increase in the 18 to 64s. That's something we haven't seen before. So we will be keeping a close eye on that and to mitigate that. But I really congratulate the department for getting the overspend down, as they have with their mitigations, to initially the 4.096 million. But as I said, the extra welcome grant from the government means that we only need to take 1.467 million out of the adult social care reserve.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mercer. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair, and as I guess looking after the other demand-led service, we all know that there are pressures in the highs needs block with SEND, and you'll know that we have done many different items in increasing the number of placements that we've got available for children with SEND, and next week, in fact, we've got some more coming forward, which is a really positive step. But of course, all this adds pressure to that fund and adds pressure to that council. So we are working with government, with other local authorities as well, to increase that funding towards that. And we're working with local schools and other organisations to support that as well. Taking the Children's Trust out of it, I think, because we have talked about that already this morning, I'd like to really thank all the officers within, the education team, because they are a great bunch that really work hard and really put children in the centre of everything that they look to do. And budgets aside, they are an amazing group of people that work hard and support our children, and I would just like to thank them for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Howell.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I think we're all suffering from colds at the moment. I fully welcome this budget and the proposal to put this forward to full council for approval. We are a council that has many statutory obligations, and as all councils do, and they are obviously providing pressures on this council. But we're not just about that. We are, as Councillor Brackenbury mentioned, we are a council that wants to encourage people to come here, to live here, to work here, to enjoy living in Northamptonshire. So providing other services that enhance and enrich our residents' lives is also a function that this as a council wants to continue to do, and to do that we have to make savings in areas which we've done in many areas, but there are certain things that we need to continue doing, and we need to encourage people to enjoy the area in which we live. Our libraries are heritage assets, are open spaces. All of those things are a benefit to everybody, to all of the health and well-being of our residents, and we aren't just here to provide statutory services. We are here to do all of the above, so to speak. It's interesting to note that the statistics that came out of the consultation, actually, I mean, everybody is struggling with the cost of living. It's across the board. But it was very interesting to see that actually 44.3% of our consultees were in support of putting the council tax up. And that's quite unusual, I would suggest. But I think that's because everybody appreciates that the cost of living is having an impact on everything and everyone. So, it's good to see that our residents are understanding the pressures that this council is under as well as themselves. So, I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howell. Councillor Howells.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up the point about the increase in budget in the NTU. As Councillor Bundy has said, effectively this is for an enhanced service and an out-of-hours service which we currently don't operate. But it's worth saying, I think every member in the room can probably testify that it's been a great frustration for us as well as members of the public that we have a service that doesn't operate out of hours, and that is a frustration in terms of the speed at which we can operate. So the enhancement of the service, which has been done through a restructure and a development in the resources that we're going to have in that area, will enable us to be able to operate that service 7 days a week. It's also worth saying that this was something we decided early on that we wanted to develop and it's not regarding the relationship with the stopping site, it's irrespective of the stopping site. However, if a stopping site was to come forward, then of course that NTU service provision will be able to facilitate that 7 days a week. So the two things combine and converge. But yes, for £65,000 to develop that service in my mind, is a small amount of money for what is essentially going to be quite impactful in regards to dealing with the unauthorised encampments in a much more timely manner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howes. Look, the financial position we find ourselves in is not unique to this authority. And I would like to obviously thank Janice, Mark and Claire and the whole financial team that have got us to this position and have burnt the midnight oil and really sort of put the effort in to get us to where we are today with a balanced budget. You know, we have 800 plus services that this council delivers. You know, it's not just about those statutory-led, demand-led type services. £1.5 billion cash transactions going through this organisation. It makes us a large entity within the area. However, we do have to listen. We do have to articulate as well our concerns around the statutory-led provisions such as children's and adults and the unprecedented demand that we're currently having in those services. Now, as many of you are aware, and I've already updated, I wrote a letter to the Secretary of State to ask for multi-year settlements, to look at the overall funding, not just here at North Northamptonshire Council, but nationally. You know, how we begin to get government and any government that comes in to take local government's views, to help local government deliver the services that we are being told we have to deliver. We have to have the right amount of funding in place to deliver those services. You get to a stage, though, where if that funding isn't forthcoming, and the local national government network has already said there's a shortfall of about £4 billion that's needed this year alone in local authorities, government has to listen. No matter what the colour of that government is, it has to understand that these are human beings that we're dealing with. These are elderly residents, some are not so elderly, obviously, children that need the state to step in and help. We need to be adequately funded for that. And that's a message that needs to be sent loud and clear to government. And I will continue to lobby to ensure that we get what we deserve and what our residents deserve. So, I would like to just go back to Councillor Bunday to wrap up on some of the comments that have been made. And over to you, Councillor Bunday.
Thank you, Chair. I reiterate everything that you say, and I think you've said a lot of what I could sum up. Apologies for getting garden waste wrong and the cost. What do I know about money? Can I also say we have officers in the room, and officers can't actually respond in person to the kind words that have been said, but on behalf of the officers and on behalf of the finance team, can I thank you for the kind words, because they do work hard. I am just the messenger at the end of the day. The only other thing I'd say is that growth is important, and growth in businesses brings jobs, and jobs brings residents, and residents brings business. And it's a cycle that works, and that's it. And with that, Chair, I'm happy to propose the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. I just want, for the purpose of no doubt, Councillor Rowley, as you came in partway through this discussion, you aren't able to vote on this, so please don't vote. So can I look for a mover of the report, which was Councillor Bunday? And Councillor Brackenbury, are you looking to second? Thank you very much. So the recommendations are set out on page 83 and 85 of your agenda pack. They've been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please?
Thank you, Councillor Howes. That's all those in favour, Chair.
Thank you very much. So moving on to item 7, which is the Household Revenue Account, HRA Draft Budget for 24-25 and the MTFP proposals. I'd like to invite Councillor William Cahoon to come to the chair. And Councillor Cahoon, you have a maximum of 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to raise an issue, Chair, on paragraph 411 on page 300 with regard to void stock. For 24-25, it is assumed that 0.9% of Corby housing stock and 2% of Kettering stock will be void at any one time. Therefore, obviously, no rental income. This is expected to reduce income by a total of £580,000. That being said, Chair, should it not be the case that we should be trying much harder to reduce void times, some of which in Corby are really extraordinarily lengthy periods of time, surely unnecessary. It could be a great cost saving to turn round voids much more quickly and efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cahoon. Councillor Anley, would you like... Okay, thank you very much for saving some time. So, Councillor Buckingham, I've got you wishing to speak.
Thank you very much, and this is going to be a very quick one. On the back of what Councillor Cahoon said on the voids, so this week we've heard about voids of up to a year on properties which, although has an impact on the HRA, also has an impact on the general fund, because although repairs and maintenance are put through by the HRA, the homelessness, the temporary accommodation, comes out of the general fund. So if we don't have the properties, or the properties are sitting there empty and not being able to be used, that is family accommodation that could be used and taken off the budget from the general fund for homelessness. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor Buckingham. So I'd like to invite Councillor Bunday now to introduce the reports.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say that I think the portfolio holder will respond to the comments on voids and how voids are handled. In an ideal world, we wouldn't want any voids, but unfortunately it will never be the case. The housing revenue account is a separate ring-fenced account within the council's budget for the income and expenditure associated with its housing stock. The HRA does not directly impact on the council's wider general fund or on the level of council tax. Income to the HRA is primarily received through the rents and other charges paid by tenants and leaseholders. The approach to the HRA budget setting has focused on three key areas: revenue income, rent and service charge levels; revenue expenditure, plans that reflect service delivery patterns; and capital expenditure, plans that will be delivered for essential maintenance to the stock, as well as ensuring that a decent home standard is maintained, and support to the new build programme, which is considered later in this report, or in a further report. Although at present North Northants Council is running two neighbourhood accounts, we are required to move towards consolidating them into one account. The council has started to move towards consolidating the two neighbourhood accounts into a single HRA. This is a substantial piece of work and will require a 30-year business plan to be produced that will be informed by the housing strategy for North Northamptonshire that is currently being developed. The draft housing revenue budgets were presented to the Tenants Advisory Panel on the 16th of November and were discussed at their meeting on the 18th of January, where formal recommendations were made pertaining to rent levels and the budget itself to today's meeting of the Executive. The Corporate Scrutiny Committee were also invited to consider these proposals as part of their wider scrutiny of the budget. Following this meeting, recommendations will be made to full council on the 22nd of February, with council being invited to approve the 24-25 housing revenue account budgets consisting of the Corby and Kettering neighbourhood accounts, an increase in the dwelling rents for 24-25 for both Corby and Kettering, and the housing revenue account medium-term financial plan consisting of the Corby and Kettering neighbourhood accounts for 25-26 to 28-29. Between them, the two neighbourhood accounts own 8,132 properties, consisting of 1, 2, 3 and 4 plus bedroom flats, houses and bungalows. East Northampton Wellingborough councils have no housing stock, having made the decision several years ago to sell them. The council is required by law to avoid budgeting for a deficit of the HRA, so the budget must not be based on total HRA revenue reserves falling below zero. In practice, the council is expected to maintain a reasonable balance of HRA reserves to cover contingencies. The Chief Finance Officer reviews the level of balances required to support the housing revenue account spend annually as part of their risk assessment of the budget. The Executive Director for Finance and Performance has assessed the minimum level of balances, taking all known risks into account, and has decided or recommended that they should remain unchanged at £800,000 for Corby and £650,000 for Kettering. The minimum balances for the two neighbourhood accounts are around 3.5% of the total budget. Details of reserves together with an estimated movements are set out in Appendix C. Numbers of right-to-buy properties and the number of empty properties must also be taken into account. The number of right-to-buy sales is assumed during 23-24 and the medium term for Corby to be 40 and for Kettering 20. It is assumed that 0.9% of the Corby neighbourhood housing stock and 2% of the Kettering neighbourhood housing stock will be void at any one time, and therefore rent cannot be charged. This reduces the total income expected to be achieved by £205,000 for Corby and £375,000 for Kettering. Acquisition and new building programmes increase the number of housing stock for the HRA. It is anticipated that within Kettering neighbourhood account, a further 8 homes will be delivered at the Grange during 24-25, and the part-year effect has been reflected in the revenue account. Further schemes will be reflected in the medium-term financial plan when there is more certainty around the time delivery of them. The housing revenue account budget for 24-25 shows a balanced position for both Corby and Kettering neighbourhood accounts separately, which amounts to a total overall budget of nearly £42.5 million. The Corby neighbourhood account shows a deficit over the period of the medium-term financial plan to the end of 2028 financial year of £736,000, whilst over the same period the Kettering neighbourhood account shows a surplus of just over £2 million. The main reasons for the difference between the two neighbourhood accounts results on how the loans for self-financing were structured. The Corby neighbourhood account is increasing its contribution for the repayment of the loans, whereas the Kettering neighbourhood account is reducing. This is reflected in the tables at Appendix B. To achieve a balanced state of the proposal, the proposal is for the average rent increase of 7.7%, which reflects CPI plus 1% and is in line with the recommendations from central government and amounts to an average increase of £6.68 to £93.42 per week for Corby and £7.05, which increases to £98.58 per week for Kettering. It should be noted that the HRA is self-balancing, so a smaller rent increase would require reductions in expenditure. For instance, a 1% reduction in rent would result in a cumulative impact on the 30-year business plan of some £11 million across both neighbourhood accounts. And with that, Chair, I'm happy to propose the recommendation in paragraph 3.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. Councillor Rowley, I see you've indicated to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for my lateness. Fully welcome this report. As everybody knows, the HRA budget is a ring-fence budget that's from the rental income from our council house stock. So we've always got to manage it, as Councillor Bunday said, to make sure we don't go into deficit. We're not allowed to. And the team do very well trying to upgrade our current properties and do repairs and do the voids and build new houses when they can. To touch on the voids are good in that means we've got we've got residents who've used our housing stock and then moved on to hopefully bigger and better accommodation that more suitable for them. That allows us to bring more people in who are in desperate need for housing. The challenge has always been how quickly we can turn those around, and the major voids, as have been mentioned, do cause us problems. The vast majority of our residents do look after the properties. Unfortunately, one or two don't. And I know of two housing examples where it's costing £90,000 to bring them back because of the damage caused by the residents. And that has to come out of the HRA budget. So that means other properties that were due for upgrades of their kitchens and bathrooms, that's had to be delayed. So the team do operate for major voids that they only do so many at a time to make sure they stay within budget. They do make sure the HRA is balanced and we don't blow the budget. So that sometimes leads to what looks like delays of nothing happening. It's just purely managing the budget. In terms of new housing stock, as Councillor Bunday mentioned, the Grange is coming online hopefully soon. The building will start. The building groundwork started pre-June last year to make sure that we didn't fall into problems with changes in planning regulations which would have made the development unfinancially viable. So it would have stopped if we hadn't have done that. There were some challenges with the tender process. Those have now been resolved and the tender has been awarded. So the work can, once the weather improves, the work can start. So I fully welcome this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. So I'm looking around the room, there's no further comments. Councillor Rowley, sorry. Councillor Bunday has moved the report. Can I look for someone to second that report? Councillor Rowley, thank you very much. So the recommendations are set out on page 278 of the Council Agendas pack. They've been moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please?
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, at this time, I've been told that someone needs a comfort break, so if we can take a 10-15 minute comfort break and we will continue. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for your patience. So we now move on to item agenda 8, the capital programme 24 to 28. So I'd like to invite Mr. Michael Blissett to address the meeting. Mr. Blissett, you have a maximum of 3 minutes to address the meeting.
Thank you, Chairman. The money that is being borrowed at 5.6% by the council taxpayers to construct a temporary stopping off site for travellers is not good value for money. You are wasting £1.3 million to build a site on a site that is ridiculously expensive to convert because of its position and makeup, and the devastation of a fantastic wildlife area that should be protected from development, and this is confirmed by the Wildlife Trust. The 10-year cost to the taxpayers is around £2.7 million, and then an ongoing cost around 100k per year indefinitely. It is made quite clear by Councillor Howes that the site at Rothwell is likely to stand empty for long periods of time, so there will be no income. When Councillor Howes was in Rothwell Town Council meeting, he stated it will be £120 a night and a £250 deposit. The travellers have made it quite clear that they wouldn't be willing to pay that. I spoke at the meeting on the 21st and the 18th and put forward an alternative where the site could be constructed for 50k against 1.3 million, and the running cost 50% cheaper than the proposed Rothwell site. This is to use one of the old disused areas of road on the A43 between Kettering and Northampton. You already have the hard standings for at least 10 vans. All you will need to do is to put gates each end and a fence across the front. These areas of disused road have lots of trees, hedges, vegetation protecting them from the A43. You need to supply a mobile toilet shower unit, electric and water supply. You can build all of this for 50k against 1.3 million. Well, I've costed this as a professional building contractor. On the A43, the caravans will be well back from the road and will be quiet. It will be quiet. If the site was constructed at Rothwell, right next to the A14 and the A6, the noise would be intolerable. On the 21st and the 18th meetings, the alternative site of the A43 was put to the committee and was completely ignored and not discussed. I'm now putting this to you as the executive committee and asking you to discuss this alternative site in detail today. That would be good value for money. It is not good value to money to spend 1.3 million on the Rothwell site. It is good value to spend 50k on the alternative 43 site. Over a period of 10 years, we'll be saving over £2 million. Other costs that would not have been factored in into the 1.3 million on the Rothwell site are the new biodiversity net gain coming in the next few weeks. This will be very expensive. The B&G has to be managed for 30 years and could add another 100k. On the alternative site on the A43, I think that would be zero. As a council,
Mr. Blissett, you are out of time now, I'm afraid. So thank you very much for your contribution to the meeting.
Well, I think you have a hard copy of it.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Mr. Dave Thorney to address the meeting. Mr. Thorney, you have a maximum of 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points in relation to finance and associated issues with the temporary stop site. You have indicated that monies to fund such a project will come from the Council's purse. In doing so, the Council suggested that at the meeting on the call-in meeting, that this will be funded by the cutting of other services. £1.3 million is an awful lot of money to be taken away from what would assume will be valued and utilised community groups or organisations. Choose wherever you cut and reduce your spending, it is clear that you will displace large numbers of persons reliant on the council and their services. Any within these groups with vulnerability, health problems or mobility issues will undoubtedly have to fall back into the council's care elsewhere and cost just as much, if not more. It appears poor distribution of funds to take away from something used and valued to something that may not even be used at all. In terms of adult social care, reports indicate that in this county alone, the over 65 population will rise by 51% by 2030. This should become a priority. If the site were to be installed as the council has considered the greater costs that will be incurred by our associated services, one of which I refer to as the police, as you've indicated they will facilitate the transfer of travellers to the stop site if they are found to have camped illegally elsewhere. The police service is currently under-resourced and grossly underfunded, yet although the council is the lead agency on such issues, there is the assumption that the police will simply direct persons to the site or use their powers of arrest. This, I fear, is highly unlikely to happen, as such incidents of travellers occupying land will be downgraded and to be a community issue to be dealt with if and when by the local beat team, and I'm sure their brief will be to monitor and watch. Why would they incur costs and raise community tensions when it is likely to resolve itself? So again, highly unlikely they will move persons or vehicles to your site. Spontaneous arrests are unlikely if no damage is reported or seen if there's not a perceived breach of the peace. National Police lead and council suggest to show sympathy towards the travellers and not use draconian measures to move them to where they don't want to go. If large number of travellers are in the area for weddings or funerals as indicated and police action were to be taken, this will massively implicated on their resources. Large numbers of staff, and particularly trained staff, will have to be brought forward to enforce the removal of the vehicles and travellers. This will have a huge impact on their budget and potentially overwhelm their own departments, such as custody and investigation. The knock-on effect that there will be potential for any vulnerability discovered to be dealt with by social services, appropriate adult services, and again at what cost financially to everybody else in the county. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forley. I'd like to invite Councillor Jim Hakewell to address the meeting. Councillor Hakewell, you have a maximum of 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, once again. I'd like to thank those speakers and residents who have come along today to express their opposition to the removal of Rothwell Green Space. Throughout this meeting today, you've been making the point about lack of funding, about priorities, about asking government for more funding. I think when you go to government and we explain to them this whole project of using capital and revenue, government might well say, get your own house in order first. I'm working on the 15th line of your Appendix A, which is Travellers Temporary Stopping Site. It is not too late to remove the capital and by implication revenue costs of well over 2 million from this budget. It's with some sadness that I find myself as a councillor representing Rothwell Maudsley to be fighting for the third time to have an ill-advised decision of this executive committee reversed, a decision that has been made in isolation with no clear evidence reasoning likely to consume capital and revenue outside any best value criteria, or of which could be directed to the demand-led services that you have questioned all morning. Paragraph 4.1 in your report, the current capital strategy demonstrates how the council will make expenditure investment decisions in line with service objectives and properly take account of stewardship, value for money, prudence, sustainability, and affordability. None of those criteria apply to this line 15 of 1.3 million. If there was any need for urgency in this particular issue, the former Borough Council would have got on with its local plan in the 3 years it had before North Northamptonshire Council was created, and another 3 years later in North Northamptonshire, we still haven't done anything. That doesn't mean that you do something ill-advised. It's clearly not in the public interest to rush through this outside the Council's published policy, which continues in the spring. Several hundred responses to the engagement of the failed 2022 stopping site bid were never shown to the Executive or the Scrutiny Management Board, 25 pages of them. There was a wholesale rejection of the site selection for many material, I say material, planning reasons. No one I talk to, including our traveller community, can understand the haste or conclusion that Rothwell Green Space should be destroyed or that it would in any way represent best value for taxpayers. It seems quite horrifying that the Executive should deliberately go headlong into a battle with hundreds, if not thousands, of residents by spending on a planning application that has multiple material reasons for being refused. Delete this capital proposal
Hakewell,
and
that's
start
your-
talking
Councillor
and
Hakewell, that's
listening
your
to
time.
residents rather than dictating.
Councillor Hakewell, that's your time over. Thank you very much. Councillor Maxwell, would you like to come and address the meeting? You have a maximum of 3 minutes.
Good morning again. Director of Public Health and Communities, page 332. Question. Grants to village halls. Which are these halls and what is it for? I asked for a grant for streetlights for Denford. Due to the chairman sadly passing away and had not created enough funds. These are now obsolete and they need 22,000 for LED lights. The letter that Tom Pursglow received from Graham Kane stated that there is no urgency in completing an upgrade. Of course, operating costs would be greatly reduced if it was done. He stated these lights are not optional. They are not, statutory requirement, and the option simply is to remove them. Well, what happens to the residents, all 135 houses? They walk around the village in the dark and may have an accident. A main road runs through this village, as we know. He then states the residents may not see this as an ideal situation and may not prefer to lose this amenity. Mr. Kane was sorry he could not offer a constructive response. When I speak to Denford Council next week, what would you think their response will be? Therefore, why not name the village halls on page 332? Why cannot we loan the money and then the village pays it back? This is not a hall. Secondly, on page 337, various SEND schemes to provide new SEND capacity to meet the demands across NNC. What are these going to be? £3,489. More school places? On page 348, 3.6, how many council houses are going to be built in 2024-2025? And are these for disabled people? On page
Councillor Maxwell, you are now over your 3 minutes, so I'm going to have to stop you, I'm afraid.
Right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Buckingham, you have a maximum of 3 minutes to address the meeting.
Thank you very much. Slightly quick one. On page 331, Corby Towns Fund, the amounts there for overall spend are a lot less than was originally said. So for the multi-use building, 713,000 as opposed to 1.5 million, which is within the tender documents for the lease on the property. It also says that it will take 2 years, although that money is within the first year. So can't quite understand that. And also the train station to town centre, 2 million to be spent overall. Yet we were told at least sort of 8 million for that. So just don't understand those numbers. And that was basically it.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Buckingham. Happy to get some reassurance out to you via email around those numbers. I'd like to invite now Councillor Joseph Smythe to address the meeting. Councillor Smythe, you have a maximum of 3 minutes.
Good morning, Chair, members, officers. Value for money, specifically concerning the proposed spend on a traveller stopping site at Junction 3 on the A14. Rothwell Town Council objects most strongly against this project. You're looking to spend £1.3 million, which is actually almost £2.5 million if you include the interest on the loan and the running costs over 10 years. Councils are obliged to ensure that any expenditure of public money is value for money. How can this be value for money when even the portfolio holder, Councillor David Howes, stated in a meeting with Rothwell Town councillors that this site would hardly be used, if ever? This, when the council is already overspent on its budget this year, we have a cap on spending where anything over £500 has to be approved. And in 2025-26, we have a budget gap of 41.45 million. So why are we continuing to push this forward if it is not to be used? And the site will destroy a green space that will probably stand there and be derelict in a very short space of time. This is most definitely not value for money. There has not been any proper consultation with stakeholders on this project. When NCC councillors for Rothwell were told about this proposal last year, that was me, they were told to keep the proposal strictly private and confidential. This seems very underhanded. Rothwell Town Council have shown great interest in taking this land and turning it into a pocket park for the residents. But you have blatantly ignored any request from the council to take this forward, and yet again, NNC are not listening to councillors or local residents. The tax-paying public must have confidence in us as a council when we spend their money. So I ask you to reconsider and cancel this proposal and not borrow 1.3 million when we are already in financial difficulty with the budgets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smythe. Before we move to Councillor Bunday to introduce the report, I just wanted to make some comments on the proposed traveller site there in Rothwell, and I thank the people that have come from Rothwell to voice their opinion today on this. However, you know, a couple of you had said about opening up the A43 into a lay-by. What I want to remind people is that the travelling community travel around the United Kingdom for various things. They choose a nomadic lifestyle. We shouldn't be in any way discriminating against them and not being able to offer them any particular place that they can go when they come to Northamptonshire. This site gives them sanitary facilities, gives them a dry area that they can park and rest for a period of time, and also to bear in mind that these processes are just the beginning of this. Nothing has been agreed. There's going to be planning processes that have got to go through. There's no call on the capital as of yet. It's just earmarked in there. We will begin to go through the process, and everyone, and I mean everybody, will get their opportunity to put their fors and againsts, and you know, we will listen as an executive to those, and as a council we will listen as well. So I just wanted to offer some reassurance to the people of Rothwell that this is not a done deal. You can shake your head all you like, sir. It really doesn't bother me. But I'm just trying to reassure you that this is not a done deal. There's a lot of processes to go through at the moment. So with that, Councillor Bundy, would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. You've taken some of the words out of my mouth as far as comments goes. As far as Councillor Buckingham goes, I think you'll find that some of the funding you're talking about is actually the 23-24 budget, so it's in the prior year to the one that's being referenced here, and that's why there appears to be lesser sums there. This report sets out the baseline capital programme for 2024-25 and the indicative medium-term financial plan for North Northamptonshire Council. With the draft budget, this formed part of the budget consultation that concluded on the 26th of January and was presented to the Corporate Scrutiny Committee in January. This report contains 4 appendices. Appendix A, Baseline Capital Programme 24 to 28. Appendix B, Baseline HRA Capital Programme 24 to 28. Appendix C, the Baseline Development Pool. And Capital D, the Capital Strategy. The capital programme assumes various sources of funding, including capital receipts and grants, together with support from external and internal borrowing, which is at the discretion of the Council for essential capital spend.
Sorry, Chair, I can't hear because of the conversations going on in the public.
So, Councillor Hakewell, could you be quiet, please? Thank you. Thank you.
The current capital strategy that is set out in Appendix D demonstrates how the Council will make expenditure and investment decisions in line with service objectives and properly take account of stewardship, value for money, prudence, sustainability and affordability. The final capital strategy and the Treasury Management Strategy will be presented to the full Council for approval at their meeting on the 22nd of February. Paragraph 5.2 sets out the key principles underpinning this report. Paragraph 5.3 outlines the governance and approval process of new capital schemes. New capital investment will only be permitted if it contributes to the achievements of the Council's strategic priorities. The capital programme is £171.8 million, consisting of the General Fund Baseline Programme of £113.1 million and HRA Baseline Programme totalling £58.7 million. There is also a development pool of £169.6 million, which includes schemes awaiting formal business cases. The General Fund Baseline Programme includes key projects such as highways, disabled adoptions, school improvements and extensions, and various property and environmental projects across North Northamptonshire, together with significant investment in the highway infrastructure network over and above the Integrated Transport Grant funding. The HRA Baseline Programme is across Kettering and Corby's housing stock, together with significant investment of £20.2 million proposed for the housing development and new build programmes. The development pool also holds projects that are indicative of future investments and will be subject to completing satisfactory business case prior to executive approval and inclusion within the formal programme. The following new investments have been put forward as part of the revised main programme for 24-25 for approval by Council. £9 million over a 3-year period, 24 to 27, £3 million each year funded from borrowing for investment into the highways infrastructure across North Northamptonshire. £1.3 million across 2 years to develop a travellers temporary stopping site funded from borrowing. £123,000 investment into play facilities at Sywell Country Park during 24-25 funded through capital receipts. £749,300 investment into Alfred Street and Tennyson School. This has been moved from the development pool to the main programme and will be funded through DFE Basic Needs Grant. £125,000 to support the upgrading of the public library network, which will be met from capital receipts. The minimum revenue provision reflects the minimum amount a council must charge to the revenue budget each year to set aside a provision for repaying external borrowing. The increase in this provision is £1.735 million, is to ensure that the provision is aligned to our policy moving into the medium term. This is part of the Treasury Management Strategy that was presented earlier today. The disaggregation of the capital assets, balance and debt are still to be finalised and subject to the final certification audit of the 2021 financial accounts for Northamptonshire County Council and Corby Borough Council. This may have implications for the current assumptions. Members should note that there has been amendments to the budget proposals that I presented to the Executive in December. This is to include reprofiled items within the capital programme in 23-24 across the medium-term capital programme for 24-25. Within public health and communities, shown in the table of paragraph 6.4.2, and a transfer from the development pool of £1.75 million into place and economy for workplace transformation. The Corporate Scrutiny Committee has a critical role to play in scrutinising and reviewing the budget proposals, ensuring that they are subject to rigorous challenge. A report from the committee was presented earlier in this meeting, and with that, Chair, I'm happy to propose the recommendations of paragraph 3.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bunday. And I absolutely welcome this report. I welcome the capital investment within our infrastructure in North Northamptonshire, and I especially welcome the £9 million that's going to be invested in our highways. It's much needed, and it absolutely goes to show we will invest in the right areas for this authority. I'd like to open this up to debate from other councillors. Councillor Brackenbury, you've indicated you wish to speak.
Indeed I have, thank you, Chair. It's in fact slightly disappointing that Councillor Hakewill and friends have chosen to leave just as we start to debate the item upon which they were speaking. But I would, if they pick it up on the feed later, and for those who are listening, I would reiterate that the Travellers Stopping Site is not yet a done deal. It is a proposal. It is an interesting proposal to bring the ability for travellers to have a space for their purposes, rest, recreation, what have you, on a temporary basis. And it gives, of course, it does give the police powers to move travellers on from unauthorised encampments if they choose to set those up. But I don't really want to talk too much about that, except to assure people that the Travellers' site will have a full and proper planning process at which there will be proper consultation of any stakeholders who can say whatever they want, and then a planning committee will take a decision on its own merits when that application eventually comes forward. Moving on, though, Chair, echoing your remarks, I welcome this capital programme. I welcome the ambitious projects that are in this development pool and in the actual capital programme, reflecting our corporate priorities. The funding that we've received on the Rural England Prosperity Fund and the UK Shared Prosperity Fund have already done tangible good to businesses and organisations up and down North Northamptonshire. Councillor Buckingham, you know, absolutely, the Towns Fund allocation is going into the 4 projects that we know, but in this particular capital programme, the multi-use building and the train station to town centre funds. And again, the whole of the 4 projects will bring material improvements to the lives of residents and students and visitors to Corby. And we will double check the figures in terms of your question, but I think that some of them have already been taken into account in previous budgets. But of course, the overall government grant was what it was, and it's still purposed for that. So I'll perhaps get back to you offline on that. But further, Chair, just to welcome some of the work on SEND provision and school extensions. That's brilliant stuff, really, really good. And the work that Councillor Howell is championing with improvement in library provision up and down North Northampton, which is also great. And I also note with pleasure in the development pool, we do have yet to identify the external funding, the work on flood alleviation, which, as I started this meeting earlier, saying on a morning like this may be rather cogent. But again, ambitious stuff. There's a lot in there. There's a lot of really interesting projects coming forward, and you know, I think it reflects credit on everybody who's been working to bring these up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brackenbury. Councillor Penton.
Thank you, Chair. Wanted to highlight the number of very welcome projects in the capital programme with regard to the green environment and sustainability, In particular, there's the significant funding around the treescape, so tree planting, and lots of that funding comes from external sources, which is always good for the council. But there's also the Levi funding, so the local electric vehicles infrastructure. Again, very significant funding to ensure that we are putting in a number more EV charging points across the Northamptonshire and making that more accessible to residents. That sits alongside the 123k investment into new play equipment at Sywell Country Park, which is highlighted in 5.6, but also further down in the report in Appendix B, the continued investment in Homes for the Future across Kettering and Corby, which is really welcome.
Thank you very much, Councillor Penton. You make some good points. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as Councillor Brackenbury said, I'm surprised that all the speakers for the Traveller site have all left. Otherwise, it was for many years at Kettering Borough Council on the Rural Forum, as Councillor Howes will probably remember. For years we were, that forum was asking, especially the chairman, was asking for a Traveller stopping site, which was never materialised, and now he's against one. And the A43 obviously sounds like a great idea, but the dualling of the A43 is coming forward, so presumably that lay-by will disappear with the dualling, so it'd be a wasted fund anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Rowley. I just want to interject again on that, because I don't think a lay-by on the side of an A43, and I know you're not suggesting that's where it should be. I just want to reaffirm, you know, people that choose to live a nomadic lifestyle require the adequate type of sanitation facilities, and a lay-by doesn't offer that, and that's not what this council's about. But I know you wasn't going to say it.
But going back to the substantive bit of the housing capital programme, there's £58.7 million over the programme of spending and adaptations for our housing stock, which has got to be congratulated. Homes of the Future was a brilliant scheme that Kettering ran. Many homes have benefited massively in energy saving costs from that, and I welcome the fact that we're going to carry that on not only in Kettering but Corby as well. We've got heating improvements, energy improvements, new kitchens and bathrooms, which I'm sure Councillor Lee will be very happy with, because we've always had at Kettering Borough Council lots of conversations about those. Major voids work has got £500,000 a year in there for capital. So we are investing in our housing stock. We are building new housing stock where we can, and fully support this report.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair, and Councillor Brackenbury has alluded to it, but I will answer Councillor Maxwell's point about the 3,489,000 or various SEND provisions, and that is literally various schools throughout Northants that will have an extra unit for pupils with SEND needs. So it's not one specific school, it's various schools. We've been working with a lot of mainstream schools to be able for children to stay in mainstream education, but also to get the extra help that they may need. And that's what the £3,489,000 is. I alluded in the first part of the budget about those provisions, and you'll see a new one coming next Thursday at the next executive meeting, and I'm sure you'll be there for that as well, Councillor Maxwell. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, like others, obviously, we've had some points put to us today, and it's sad that those people have not listened to the responses, because there is. I just wanted to highlight a couple of points that are not quite true. So, Mr. Blissett, for the third time, has suggested, and for clarity, it is not a cost of £120 a night. This is the third time I've now said this. It's £120 a week. That's what the executive report stated. So I just want, for the clarity of that, to go out that it's not that figure. Another speaker talked about the removing of services in lieu of this budget. Well, again, we know that that's not the case. There is no removal of services. It's a reallocation within the capital pool that is allowing us to develop the stopping site. And the other point that I'd like to make is someone suggested that the police are unlikely to deal with the travellers and it would be a hindrance. And quite the contrary. The conversations with the police are that a stopping site will aid their work because they won't be dealing with the travelling community in places that are not desirable for the settled community or possibly indeed the travelling community. So having a designated space to give them the facilities that they require will actually reduce the police efforts and work. There are a number of other points, but as the speakers are not here, and I don't want to turn this meeting into another report regarding the stopping site, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Howes. Councillor Howell.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I welcome this report, and I'm delighted, obviously, now that we have the capital funding towards the renewal of the Kettering Library roof. The project is underway. You'll start to see a lot more action now. I'm giving regular updates to all of our members and also our stakeholders and press releases with regards to the direction in which that's travelling, to try and keep everybody up to speed with everything that's going on. Obviously, as I've said before, this is a worst-case scenario budget. We're obviously hoping to come in well within the budget that's been allocated and bring the site back up and running as soon as possible. I'd also like to state that Councillor Brackenbury mentioned about some of the money that's been spent on from the Shared Prosperity Fund, which we really, really welcome. It's enabled us to, to look at developing our tourism strategy, which also will help bring growth and income into the area by improving the facilities and things that we have here. I know that we've developed our business case around our cultural heritage and tourism, and we haven't plucked the figure out of the air as certain councillors would like to do, but we've actually come up with a true figure. We've managed to save money in that budget, £172,000 worth of savings from that budget by bringing these services together. And you know, we're not killjoys. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to enjoy their lives here in Northamptonshire. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howe. Councillor Binley.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to pick up on a couple of the points out of the capital programme. Of course, we have in there the Isham bypass, and I know somebody's already mentioned the A43 dualling. Of course, these are really, really positive programmes and show that we are committed as an authority into investing in the infrastructure and future-proofing Northamptonshire. So those are really, really positive things. I know, of course, there are plenty of other things in the Capital Works programme that are positive, but those are just two key bits that I wanted to pick out of my portfolio area. Just to also respond to the points made by Councillor Maxwell regarding the LED lighting upgrade. Of course, we are running our own LED lighting upgrade programme at the moment for the street lights that we are responsible for as a local authority, not those that have been devolved to other town and parish councils. Whilst, of course, I do have the sympathy with the parish council and the circumstances surrounding the parish council in question that Councillor Maxwell has discussed with me, of course, bearing in mind we're having discussions about our own challenging set of circumstances and how we are managing our finances sensibly. Unfortunately, it is up to that parish council to manage their own finances. As we know, there are NCALP guidelines with regards to how much they must have in reserves, and therefore I don't know their specific circumstances with regards to their reserves, but of course they need to look at their precept and or their reserves. But, as I discussed with Councillor Maxwell, there are other options as well, because as we know, town and parish councils are able to actually go out and bid for various other levels of funding from various other organisations. So it might well be that they do have the ability to tap into some of that funding, and I would encourage Councillor Maxwell to speak to our community grants team within NNC, who may be able to help point them in the right direction if they're not able to deal with it through their own precept or reserves. But of course, unfortunately, well, I say unfortunately, we're not a bank, we can't loan money, and that would, in itself would bring a huge amount of complications along with it. Just to pick up, Chair, and to respond, unfortunately, of course, Mr Blissett's not here, but I do have a bit of a response to the proposal, because it's something that we have gone away and looked at with regards to the A43. And, Chair, I fully appreciate your comments that you've made with regards to the protected characteristics of these individuals who absolutely rightly choose this lifestyle, and we must respect that. However, what we've done is we've gone and we've looked at the technicalities around it as well. So I assume that Mr Blissett was referring to the two lay-bys between the Sywell roundabout and the Hannington Crossroads. They are former sections of the A43 before the A43 was straightened. So therefore they are adopted highway. So we've looked into this, and officers will formally respond to Mr Blissett outside of this meeting. But just in summary, to implement a suggestion such as this, we'd need to remove the highways rights over the road, and local authorities, in 90+% of cases, they don't own the land underneath the adopted highway. If we do that, we remove the highways rights over the road, and therefore, as a result, it ceases to be highways land, and it reverts to the adjacent landowner. So that would be the situation with both of these lay-bys, these aforementioned lay-bys. We'd also need to maintain access to the adjoining fields, as there are also public rights of way connected to those lay-bys, and that is a situation that can take years to unravel. And then, of course, Chair, as you've rightly mentioned, then there are the issues around utilities and making sure that the individuals have got access to those utilities, but the fact that there may well be utilities underneath, because it is the previous road, and lots of utilities are underneath our roads, which would mean that we would have to work that out with the utility providers, because those potentially would need to be moved because they would need access to them. There is also a final complication in the fact that the A43 in this area is a boundary between us and West Northants Council. And most of the length of these lay-bys are actually in West Northamptonshire Council's area. So as you can see, it's quite a complex situation. It's not just a case of that would be something simple, and it has been looked at, it's been explored. But I know Councillor Howes doesn't want to go over everything, but I do just want to pick up a few of the points that were raised as well, because I am very supportive of this in the form that it is at the moment. The cost issues and people talking about not being value for money, less value for money, there are a huge cost implications within my portfolio area with unauthorised encampments because of the damage that's caused, the waste that's left, the associated disposal cost of said waste. There are actually other costs there to us as a local authority that people don't necessarily realise. And I also, same as Councillor Howes, I don't agree with the comments about the police. From personal experience and the frustrations within the police, I know that they will be wholeheartedly supportive of this. And Chair, one final thing. Is scrutiny not welcome here? Well, hang on a second. It's been before scrutiny. Scrutiny have agreed with the decision made previously by the executive, but it seems that one member now doesn't agree with scrutiny. Seems a bit hypocritical there. Anyway, I shall leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Jolly good, Councillor Binney. Probably a good place to leave it. Councillor Bunday, you've heard various things. I'm not going to ask you to sort of summarise that up, because I don't think you really can. I think everything's been said. So I know that you have moved that report. Was there anything you wanted to add? Or?
Well, Not really. I think everything has been said. I don't think anybody should take too much from Councillor Hakewill leaving early, because every time I speak, he does seem to get up and walk out. So, but we have before us an ambitious. We have before us. Thank you. We have before us an ambitious programme in very challenging times, and I think we should be commended for it. And with that, I'm happy to propose the recommendations to paragraph
Well done,
3.
Councillor Bunday. Thank you very much. Can I look for someone to second that? Matt, Councillor Vinley, thank you very much. That's been moved and seconded, and the recommendations are set out on page 322 of the agenda pack. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please?
That is unanimous, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So I can confirm that I've received no requests to consider any urgent items of business at this meeting, so that does conclude the meeting for today. And I thank everybody, members, officers and the public who have been in attendance, and also the members of the public that are online, and now declare the